That was the hardest thing I ever had to do regarding the Navy. Well, I say that. It didn't seem so hard at the time. The hardest thing actually came later. When I was 2 years old, my parents moved to Texas, and obviously I went with them. I was not a part of the decision making. It was a time and place where kids could be kids. We had a big yard. Across the street was almost like a park area, there were no houses in it. And on the other side of that was a ship canal where big ships would come in and go up the river, basically going up to Beaumont and to Orange, Texas. So there was lots of space. Kids would run around in the neighborhood, and there was no concern about where were the kids. Kids were outside playing, and when it rained, the ditches filled with water. We made little wooden boats and tied strings on them and sticks, and we would tow the boats around through the ditches filled with water. Dogs pretty much ran free throughout the neighborhood. Boys and girls played together, and it was a stress-free environment to grow up in, and it was ideal. I was in 4th grade, 5th grade, something like that when we moved. Parents didn't discuss things like that very much with their kids in those days. It was just, okay, we're going to move to Illinois, okay. When I was in high school, I didn't like it too much because if I squealed the tires in the car while I was driving through town, my mother knew it before I got home, and that wasn't so great. But on the other hand, people looked out for one another. It was a small town environment and very nice. I was blessed with a set of brains that made me the smart kid in the class. I wasn't sure where I wanted to go to college. I was pretty sure I wanted to study engineering. Why engineering? Because engineering teaches people how to solve problems, how to collect data, how to collect the facts, how to define a problem, and then look for a rational solution to it. And decided to go to MIT. Why? I don't know. It was closer. My dad had gone there. My brother was going to MIT. My uncle had gone to MIT. MIT was sort of a family thing. After the first year, I left because my view was that an engineer built things for people to use, which meant you ought to know something about your audience, about people. And MIT wasn't teaching a lot of courses having to do with people. They were teaching the engineering stuff and not the people skills. So I left MIT and went to Swarthmore, which is a small Quaker school outside Philadelphia.
When you went to school for engineering, did you have was that always the plan? Always knew you wanted to be an engineer? Was there some sort of end goal, dream job that you had in mind?
No, my dream job would have been My dream job would have been to have been a musician. I loved music. Damn. If I was born in 31 and World War II started in 41, I would have been 10 years old. And the war went from 41 to 45, so 4 years. So the ages from 10 to 14 were the ages that basically were obviously very formative for me. And part of the formative process that took place was you're a Boy Scout, you're doing scout things, you're a kid growing up, you're not old enough to be in the military to help with the war now. But there was a responsibility there to do one's bit in the military. There was just a mindset back in those days that said that that's what you did. So I did. We were growing up in farming country in Illinois, south of Chicago, well outside the, 35 miles in those days was a big deal. So we were well outside Chicago, farm country, no water around particularly, and I simply fell in love with boats. I have no idea why. I thought boats were the greatest thing around. I wanted to do boats. I wanted to be involved with boats. Loved being on the water, and so wanted to do that and wanted to be in the Navy, and I guess because was the military service that was involved with the water.
How are your parents? Are they supportive of that?
They were supportive of that in general, yes. And then when I told them I was going to be a deep sea diver and a ship salvage officer, they were not so supportive of that. But they accepted the fact that I was at the age where I was going to make my own decisions, and they didn't do anything to fight it. And then when I told them I was going to be a submarine officer, they were even less pleased. But by then pretty much resigned to the fact that I was going to do my own thing, whatever it was, while I was in the Navy. The purpose was to put the diving suit on us and let us then go into the water wearing the diving suit, because some people, when they get in the water wearing a diving suit, begin to hyperventilate and basically get they're scared. And so the plan was you get to go down the ladder to the bottom of the ladder, don't step off the ladder. Just hang on to the ladder, and when it's time to come up, we'll give 2 jerks on the cord, and you can come up. Well, I got down there and got 2 jerks on the cord, and they wanted me to come up. I wasn't about to come up. It was wonderful. Infinite supply of air coming into the helmet. You could see out. You could look and see in all directions. Your eyes weren't all cloudy with the water. You could breathe, and it was just a scene of I'd never been in the water in that kind of an environment before, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. So they gave a couple more jerks on the cord, and I didn't come up. And they started pulling on me, and I wrapped my arms around the ladder so that they couldn't pull me up. Well, finally, they started, I don't know how many guys they had pulling on the lines trying to pull me up, and the ladder was jerking on the side of the boat and whatever, and I finally came on up. And the chief took my helmet off. He said, "Well, too bad about that. You froze down there, huh?" I said, "Froze, man?" I said, "That's wonderful. I have never been in the water before where I could see stuff like that." It was just absolutely amazing. I said, can I go back down again?" He said, "Oh, we thought you froze because you were terrified." I said, "No, what's to be terrified of?" It said, "It's a wonderful environment. Let me go back." Okay, we're talking about officers' candidate school in the Navy. It's a 120-day program to take people who are not military people, most of whom have not done any prior military training like ROTC in high school or college, and to make officers from that mix of raw material. And with my commissioning, I accepted a commitment of a 3-year service period as an officer. And then later on, when I went through submarine school and learned how to operate a submarine, then before I got assigned to a submarine, I had to agree to a 1-year extension of service, so that I actually then was 4 years as an officer, plus the 4 months as OCS. Were we ever on the submarine more ready than at other times? The answer is clearly yes. There were times that we were sent to sea just to be out of port, so that we weren't sitting there as sitting ducks because somebody decided that there was a heightened level of tension and who knew what was going to happen, and let's not have our ships all sitting in port. But that was not really a whole lot of what was going on. We had enough missiles that no matter what Russia did, if they had launched an attack against the U.S., we had enough missiles and bombers that we could respond, and the policy was MAD, if you will, and that literally is what it was. It was the MAD, mutually assured destruction, and that was the thinking. That if they attack us, we'll attack them, then they'll attack us and we'll attack them. And the only thing we were absolutely sure of is that both countries would be pretty much destroyed. And this policy of mutually assured destruction was what kept things sort of this way for a large part of the Cold War. Basically 100 people living inside this machine, small group of people. Any one of them can do something stupid and kill everybody else, and everybody knows that. So you're highly dependent on one another. The morale of submariners is very high. The professionalism of submariners is very high. The skipper has an unusual ability amongst skippers of all kinds of vessels. If somebody is consistently fouling things up on the submarine, he would be warned that he was on a short leash. And if he kept on doing it, these can be personal problems, they can be professional problems. The skipper then simply adds a note into the individual service record that says so-and-so is temperamentally unqualified for submarine duty. And within 24 hours, the person was gone. And we on the submarine never knew where they went. We weren't concerned about that. That was the Navy's problem. But those few words in a service record was the end of somebody's career in submarine service. They were just gone. And so we really didn't have a lot of personnel problems. People were smart and able in doing their jobs and willing to do their jobs and good people to get along with. And so it was a good bunch of people to be with. And was headed for Port Arthur, Texas, where I was going to spend the summer. And went to Texas and ended up getting a job as a surveyor there. But on the way to Texas, I stopped in Norfolk at the submarine squadron just to check up and see what was going on and find out whether they had any news about the boat, which was up in this northern patrol by then. And walked into the submarine squadron office, and the yeoman grabbed me and said, "Mr. Mangelsdorf, the squadron commander wants to see you right now." I said, "Okay. What's going on?" And he drugged me into the squadron commander, who said, "Mangelsdorf, we got a problem." "What's the problem?" "Your friend Bill Thompson has been lost overboard." And his wife, Jenny, who I knew very well, needs help. Can you go and see Jenny? And I drove up to Baltimore and went to their house. And of course, Jenny and her parents all had questions about how could this happen, what happened, how long would Bill have been floating in the water before he finally drowned or some such thing, and how did this happen, why did it happen? And my job was basically to try and give them some comfort. The next day, Jenny and I drove from Baltimore to Sharon, Pennsylvania, which is where Bill was from. And there was a memorial service there for Bill, and we went to that, and his family had all the same kinds of questions. How could this happen? Anyhow, I spent a couple of days in Sharon, and Jenny was going to stay there with Bill's family, and I got in the car, drove to Texas, got a job as a surveyor, went back to graduate school, and basically got on with my life. Fast forward now, it's now, I want to say early 2000s. My wife had died, I'd married Linda. Phone call one day from the skipper of the submarine. Mangelsdorf, yes sir. There's a reunion coming up for the Cutlass. Yes sir, I know that. You need to be there. Yes sir. These reunions had been going on for years, and I'd never gone. Couldn't. Couldn't deal with my own feelings of grief and guilt, inadequacy. For years I had exchanged Christmas cards with Jenny, but that was it. She had remarried. She'd gotten on with her life. But I went to the Cutlass reunion and discovered that I had shipmates there who had been on the submarine when Bill got washed overboard. And they were in worse shape than I was. I had been off the boat, basically, for a couple of months when Bill was lost. There were other shipmates who were on the boat, one of whom who was really adversely impacted was a junior officer who was working on his submarine qualification notebook and wanted to work on it, was supposed to have the watch that afternoon, and had asked Bill could he swap watches with him because he was at a point in his notebook he didn't want to quit working on it. Bill said, sure, that's fine, I'll take your watch. That's the watch that Bill was lost overboard from. So Doug had been carrying for $50 years this feeling of, if I hadn't, this feelings of guilt, if I hadn't asked Bill to swap watches with me, he wouldn't have been lost. So we started a project to build a memorial bench for Bill in Sharon, PA. And one of the things I had done in my career was I'd been at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, and we had started a major fundraising program which I had organized and run. I knew how to raise money, and so the Cutlass Association people said, yeah, well, if we're going to install granite benches, we need to have money. How are we going to get money? And I just said, I'll raise the money, don't worry about it. So we started a little fundraising campaign to raise money, and we had, some like contributions from 70, 75 people towards the benches. We built a granite bench in Sharon, PA, and Bill was a golfer when he was in high school and played golf at the Buell Farm Park, the public park. And so now on the first tee of that golf course, there's a granite bench. It says in memory of Bill Thompson. We also had a bench installed at the Cold War Submarine Memorial in Charleston, South Carolina, which basically says donated by the shipmates of USS Cutlass. 50 years later, we collectively, if you will, tried to put this thing behind us and tried to do what was right. Saw Jenny, expressed our condolences to Jenny, and built these two memorial benches. Strange, the way the world works. The Navy is, for most of the people in the Navy is a young man's game. Now I realize in today's world there are women there as well, and that's good. In my time that I was in it, it was a young man's game. The Navy took young men, myself included, who were young and inexperienced, although eager, and they gave us toys to play with. And the toys were called ships and guns and equipment and diving suits and submarines. And they basically said, okay, here it is, guys. Go play. You need money to buy fuel? It's okay. We'll put fuel in it. You need money to buy ammunition? Okay, we'll buy ammunition. You need money to buy food to go support you while you do these maneuvers? Go ahead. We'll do it. And so there was just this incredible support system for we young men who were given these toys to go out and play with and learn how to make the toys do useful things. And that's a lot of responsibility to give to young men. But the Navy did it, day in and day out, not only with me, but with hundreds of other people. And it's one of the things when I go to submarine reunions these days that we marvel at. Most of the other guys are not officers, they're enlisted men. They're the people I served with. They're the other, 80 people that were on the boat. And we all marvel about the fact the Navy basically gave us these mechanical toys to play with. Sure. They gave us diesel engines that sometimes didn't run, and we made them run, but they gave us the tools to fix them. And it was just an incredible experience.
What would you say to Jordan? He's going to watch all this. What advice do you have for Jordan putting all this together? Or what would you really want him to know or maybe incorporate into his doc?
I don't think that I can tell Jordan anything useful about how to put together a documentary since I know nothing about it. I may know a little bit about life, and I can only say to Jordan, follow your instincts. If you've got a yin to go and do something, go and do it.
For me, going into this class, I was really worried because I had never edited anything and I had no idea how to put together a documentary. I was worried that I wasn't going to create a documentary that was good enough I didn't think that I had all the skills to create a really good documentary like I've seen from the past. Personally, I think I'm really lucky to do my documentary on Fred because he doesn't have a story like everybody else's. He was never in active duty, given that he was a Cold War veteran, but that doesn't mean his stories are any less meaningful. Fred still has some really great stories in there, and I'm just really grateful that I got to put those together into a documentary. Overall, I'm just really grateful that I had this opportunity to create such a meaningful documentary for such a deserving person, and at this point we haven't met each other yet, but I'm really looking forward to meeting you and your wife at the gala. Thank you so much for everything, Fred. I'm so glad that I got to create this documentary about you, and I put a lot of work into it, and I really hope that you enjoyed it.
I think what you guys are doing here is fabulous. You're all to be commended. Thank you for doing it. It's good work. Thanks.